you start at A and you don't know what Z is, and you have to go through all these other steps to get there. And that's what makes you an entrepreneur.
Did you see that opportunity from day one and look to capture it?
I wasn't going out to be a disruptor. The thing about being a developer is you're actually as good as your last deal.
You've always focused very much in the bullseye of London.
Our knowledge of central London is prolific. We probably know every player, every property.
What did it take?
It takes drive. It takes determination. It takes...
Hello and welcome to devcast, the podcast where we explore the latest trends in real estate and interview influential leaders, uncovering their strategies, drive for success in this ever-evolving landscape. We're super privileged today to sit down with a visionary leader, Naomi Heaton. She has consistently pushed the boundaries of what's possible in the realm of luxury, hospitality, unique accommodations. Naomi has honed her expertise in the real estate property development markets over several decades, turning her passion for creating exceptional living spaces into a reality. So without further ado, let's welcome Naomi, CEO and founder of The Other House, a true innovator in the market and somebody I've known for a very long time. So Naomi, thank you.
Well, thank you. And yes, we go back a very long time in history, so it's great to be here.
I know. I don't think I don't think I should volunteer quite how long.
No.
But we've known each other a long time, and you've been incredibly kind to me.
Well, I think we were both probably fairly near the beginnings of setting up our respective companies at the time.
Well, we're going to get into that. But before we do, if it's okay, who are you? Where do you come from? What shaped you into?
The thing that shaped me into my career was really the first jobs that I ever took after I graduated from university. And I was very attracted to the bright lights and the glamour of advertising. So that was really the first step from university into London life and London living. I suppose working in advertising at its heyday when it was just such an exciting, glamorous thing to do. So that was in the late 80s, early 90s. And I learned so much from that experience, and it's really shaped everything that I've done since then. So in advertising, and I end up being a director of Saatchi & Saatchi, which again was a fabulous place to work. You learn to look at the consumer, and that's really framed everything I've done, because advertising is all about speaking their language, understanding who they are, what they want to hear, what they want to do, and making sure that your brand echoes that, and that also your brand remains something of high quality, because people have to trust your brand. So I suppose forevermore, I've always looked at what people want and what people are doing, and that is really what has caused me to create these new companies, as I can see how consumer needs change. So that was really my very first step, was advertising. Do you want me to go on to my next step?
No, I want to know more. I want to know, tell me about some of the brands that everybody knows
right.
Saatchi & Saatchi. So, they were the number one, right? And I guess that was almost the peak of the advertising. We don't have adverts as good today as we did then.
Obviously advertising and the way that you advertise has changed absolutely entirely. I was in the era of the big campaign, the grand idea, the things that everybody...
Pushing the boundaries.
All those lines that everybody remembers from those original advertising campaigns. So across my agency experience, I worked for people like Cadbury, Heinz, Johnny Walker Black Label, a lot of fast-moving consumer goods, as they're called. I also worked for Mary Quant. I did a huge variety of different kind of consumables, I suppose. So a real breadth of... so with Cadbury's, again, people won't remember Nuts Hole, hazelnuts, and everyone's
Christmas
fruit and
and
nut
Easter.
case. They were... lots and lots of different advertising campaigns, and it was really fun, really lively, and a great place to work. But whilst I was working in advertising, I bought my first flat very young, and that leads us on to property. So I couldn't understand why I would pay rent if I could actually pay the same amount of money in a mortgage and actually get my own property. So I literally kind of begged, stole, borrowed to get the deposit down, to put down a mortgage for my first property, which was a garden flat in Camden Town. A garden flat really being low ground, but it did have a garden. And it was unmodernised, and I loved doing it up. It was a one-bedroom flat, loved doing it up, loved the refurbishment process, and got hooked on doing up property. So whilst I was working in advertising, and now when I look back, I'm not exactly sure how I did both, but I used to look for deals, all in W1, all in central London, and buy unmodernised properties, reconfigure, make the kitchen a bedroom and put the kitchen in the sitting room and all those things to kind of optimise the space in the flat, and do it up and make it look beautiful. And what I found was that I had a particular skill such that I could make more money out of it than the next person along the street. So that became a kind of real hobby, real passion. And I used to take out the bank manager in the days that you could take out the bank manager, kind of getting loans and mortgages when I would take them out for lunch when you knew I hadn't got any money, and also buying literally on my credit card to make up the kind of final deposit.
All whilst holding down a pretty high-powered job
very
in advertising.
high-powered job in advertising. But I got to the point in advertising where I felt that I wanted to do something on my own, that I was actually an entrepreneur. And obviously with a lot of kind of service businesses, you're kind of matching what the client wants with what the agency wants. So you'd have these creative people who, because I was what was called an account handler, as kind of the strategy person in between. And the agency, the creative, would want no logo, and the client would want as big a logo as possible, which is actually quite a funny story, which I may come on to later, because of course I've now moved client side and want bigger logos. But anyway, the fact is that you always had this kind of these two parallel paths that you're trying to bring together, but also you would be asked to do things and then the client would change their mind about what they wanted. So I wanted to go my own way. And what was completely clear to me was that just as I went out to find properties, other people, other investors needed help to find property too, and to find the right property, particularly if they were overseas. How do you find the right property? Is it in the right location? Is it in the right building? And is it the right price? So having done it myself, I could just see that there was a need for that for the investor. And of course, when I launched my first company, London Central Portfolio, LCP, there were no other buy-side companies representing in the residential market the buyer. So it was completely new, and I wasn't going out to be a disruptor. I mean, that's never really been my motivation, but it's if you see how people's needs change or what people's needs are and it's not being met, you become a disruptor.
And was this 1990? Are my notes correct?
So I set up LCP, I think, around 1990, 1991. Depends which records you look at.
And we're obviously going to get onto your property career, but just before we do, it's a big decision to say goodbye to a very successful career in a big global marketplace with the number one in the world, quite probably. So talk us through your mindset around that. Were you fearful, nervous, excited? I mean, what went through? Can you?
All right. Okay. Well, I definitely wasn't fearful or nervous. Every move I've made, for me, has been a kind of rational, thought-out move where I've measured the risk, or rather, I don't even really think that I have ever felt the moves I've made have been risky. And I think that's what makes you an entrepreneur compared with the many, many people who are really great at what they do, but they would never set up their own business or take that risk because the risk is overwhelming to them. But for me, I've always felt that everything's been thoughtful and measured. And when I left Sarches, what I did was I was a developer. I bought property, I did it up and I sold it. So my first step was continuing to do what I'd already done, which I knew had done successfully. And then it was really realizing that a more successful business model is to generate recurrent income. And the thing about being a developer is you're actually as good as your last deal. Yeah. And you've got to find that deal. And that can be very difficult. And then you're back out there doing it again. So by developing a company which didn't only just find property for investors, but then handled all the renovation for them, and then handled the letting and management for them, you end up with a completely different kind of business model with recurrent income. So therefore, again, that was just an obvious transition. It didn't happen immediately. When you talk about your life and what you did, it sounds like these kind of big grand steps, but of course it doesn't happen like that. So in fact, when I set up LCP, it was doing the buying, and then we brought in the renovation, because obviously that was something I was really experienced with, and then I could see how our clients needed the letting and management service. So it was a kind of evolving process of saying, okay, these people actually need a one-stop
more help,
service,
more support, more advice,
all through the process.
And so you understand the consumer, you saw an opportunity, you had the skill set and the market knowledge to advise clients on property investment, and I know that you've been incredibly successful overseas, with expats or foreign buyers into London. Was that from day one, or did that come over time? Did you see that opportunity from day one and look to capture it?
It was very early on that I started working with foreign buyers, and that's because if you think about the time when I was doing it, most investors, and indeed I'd say most investors now, are based overseas. So right from the very beginning, I did have connections with people who were overseas, and then probably in the mid-90s, I started travelling to Asia in particular. So I had one particular client who was a very, very well-known senior person in Hong Kong, who's been and always has been a fantastic support, and he said, you've got to come over. And so I did, and my stamping grounds were Hong Kong and KL and Singapore and Bangkok, and then also going into the kind of Middle Eastern areas as well. But as soon as I did that, the market was very much an overseas market, and that's where the appetite has been. I mean, if you take the Hong Kong market, the Singaporean market, they've always loved property. They were always first in investing, and they still very much are and will be post the kind of COVID slowdown.
Right. And am I accurate in saying, I think I am, that you've always focused very much in the bullseye of London, if you will, central London?
Yes. We have very much focused in central London. I mean, that's always been my patch. It's not to say LCP won't look at other locations. They will. We act to brief, so if a client wants a different kind of requirement, we will do that. We act for investors, and we do act for homeowners too. Our knowledge of central London is prolific. We probably know every player, every property, what's happening at any particular point in time. And we know what is good to buy, both in terms of it appreciating in value, but also meeting whatever the client actually wants and representing their needs. So, but it has very much been, up until now, a very London-centric approach.
And so I think I'm right in saying, of course, almost 29 years, you built a brilliant, very focused, very successful business in LCP. And then you decided to set up a new company. I guess you must have been thinking about that prior to 2019. But let's get on to the other house and how that came about, when the idea was born, the process that you went through, if you don't mind.
So the other house actually was born, probably conceptually, well over 10 years ago. This was not a speedy process because bringing these things to fruition are difficult to deliver and to execute. But essentially, it was just the same kind of thing, that in LCP, I could see that our tenants were, many of them being international, were looking for very central locations, because if you're over here for a year or two, you want to experience the sights and sounds, you want to be where it's at. They were looking for central locations, and ultimately location became more important than the size of the property. So they were looking for pretty small units because they wanted to be central. So you very much in LCP did get into kind of brilliant space optimization. But they then were looking for more and more aspirational interiors. They were looking to buy into a lifestyle. So the way the property looked became more and more important. And then what I could see is our tenants wanting service much more quickly. They wanting it at a click of a finger. Really, with the kind of growth of the digital age where immediacy becomes much more possible, that is what I could see our tenants wanting. And I really laughingly said, well, actually, we're selling a bunch of hotel rooms, and what they actually want is a long stay hotel. And that was the beginning of the idea. So it was absolutely derived again from observation of what people wanted, and the fact that the world was changing, and particularly the world was changing in terms of people wanting service, in terms of people wanting lifestyle. And I could see this with our long-staying tenants, that they had a great sense of place, they felt like a local, but they didn't have many other facilities. And then you'd look at the hotel end of the spectrum, and you would see that in hotels, you have lots of service, probably nowadays too much, too informal, too stuffy for a whole generation of people. But you feel very much like a visitor. It's very much revolving door. There's not much kind of intimacy or homeliness about it. And I thought, well, why don't we combine or merge or mash together hotels with service departments with long stay rental, and provide a concept where you could stay in a property, where you could stay for a night, a week, a month or year. It doesn't matter, because why were all these sectors differentiated other than lots of people had worked in one particular sector and gone down their path and not actually seen or looked at what the consumer was looking for. So the rental tenant is looking for more than they're probably getting, and the hotel guest is looking for more than they're probably getting. And what the other house does, and it's called the other house because it's your other house for as long as you're in town, the other house provides, we call it the residence club, but it provides great accommodation, club flats, small apartments, which you can also combine together to make bigger ones, with fantastic public areas, so we can bring the locals in. We have a fantastic cocktail bar, fantastic brasserie, because I wanted to bring the locals in. And then we have this private members club, and as long as you stay, you can use that club. And the whole club concept, interestingly, is really developing much, much more now. Yeah. And I think it's because people may be able to work from home, but they don't want to work at home. That people maybe value being around other people, particularly because of COVID and the absence of people.
Well, I've stayed in countless hotels, as of course you have, and when travelling for business, and sitting in your hotel room, you know, the little desk you get, and open your laptop, and you do a Zoom call, and you end the call, and I don't know about you, and then I sort of pace the room and back to it. It's pretty miserable, isn't it?
Whereas here, I mean, it is miserable, and most hotel rooms, however beautiful they are, well, one really interesting thing is you go past the bathroom, the bed, and there may be a sofa. That's how hotel rooms are designed. However, if you live in your own home, you go through your sitting room or your public area to your bedroom. You never do it the other way. So every single one of our club flats, you go through a sitting area with a kitchenette, and then you go into your sleeping area, because that is actually how you naturally live at home. Yep. So that is something that's never been done before, but yet coming from a residential background was completely and utterly obvious. And the club, I agree with you, is a fantastic asset. When I travel abroad, you know, where do I entertain my clients? Always thinking about that. Where do I have my meetings? And the club provides you that perfect kind of environment. Or you can just be working on your laptop on your own. It doesn't matter. We have a gym and we have a spa. So we have all the wonderful things you need, but it's accessible to the residents that stay with us.
So we were talking about the other house before the first building arrived, and I think my jaw dropped. Where, you know, I was thinking, oh, you got a brilliant business. I'm going to open a lifestyle club, hospitality, blended company, and I thought, how do you even go about doing that? Clearly, very capital intensive. So,
yes.
Talk us through the big steps. Okay. Of course, there have been a million smaller steps,
yes.
but.
There were a million smaller steps from when we first came up with the idea, kind of developing the concept, and then, of course, just talking to people. As we say, we kissed an awful lot of frogs before we met our prince, and we have certainly met our prince. But that in itself is very labour-intensive, and you have to be really persistent. And I suppose in terms of building a business, you have to have that drive and not be deterred. You know, knocking on so many doors, and whether it would be banks or finance providers or private equity, knocking on so many doors and talking and pitching and explaining what the concept was. And you do have to have sheer determination. I suppose you have to have a sheer belief that you're actually going to get there, that it's going to happen. I suppose you have to believe in the concept.
Yeah.
And it seemed so absolutely right, having seen what our market wanted and what the hotel market was providing, and then having the sheer determination to go on talking when every door kind of gets closed in front of you until you meet the company that buys into, that get it. And we were very, very fortunate. And what's really interesting is it was a series of steps. What I always say, you start at A and you don't know what Z is. And you have to go through all these other steps to get there. And we finally met up with a pension provider, APG, which is a Dutch pension fund, and in fact one of the biggest and most respected in the world. Yeah. And we met with their real estate office, and they got the idea. They really liked the idea of the mix between short stay and long stay. There's a very good business case for having that different length of stay. So you're not, as a hotel, you're very, very, you're dependent on transient travel, and transient travel is very cyclical. Yeah. Whereas long stay guests are obviously by nature staying with you a long time. So if you can get that blend, it makes a really good business model. Right. But also they got the idea. They loved the blurring of the lines, the fact that we weren't just one thing but we were many things, which of course is a big task, bringing many things together. And also what was really interesting for us is that, for example, when we set up the club, and we, as I say, we called it a residence club, we thought the club would just be for our residents. But the moment we opened our doors in South Kensington, we had the locals coming in saying, well, we'd like to join your club. So we could then extend it to the locals as well. We have created absolutely beautiful spaces, and I suppose that is really, really fundamental to the other house. It's a real fundamental part of the brand, and that then brings me back to branding, because we created something which was kind of esoteric, rather flamboyant, very layered, kind of cool, chic, but different, a mixture of club and contemporary. And the wow factor of what it looks like has been phenomenal.
I've seen it, and it's beautiful, and most importantly, memorable.
Yes.
Well, that would be the word I would use to describe the building. It's fabulous, and I think hotels, the vast majority, 95% just play it far too safe, my opinion.
They do.
And it's a little bit like a buy-to-let. I mean, I'm sure you give much better advice than this, but back in the day, it was like magnolia walls, and it was just quite depressing when you see, when you're on the tenant side of the equation, and you're looking at essentially the same offering.
Exactly.
Time and time again.
And people want experiences, and that's a fundamental part of the other house, is giving people experiences. I think travel now is not just getting to a location and doing your business and then leaving. Yeah. It's very much to do with, what am I going to take out of this? How am I going to be part of the locality? What is going to be memorable? So, one of our kind of brand pillars is to create memorable experiences, and I think that's really important. But the fact is, the interior design became more important than I could ever have believed. I mean, it's wonderful, but it set the benchmark for all our other properties we got in Covent Garden and Belgravia, because we will always be part of the other house family. That's really important with a brand, that people know what to expect, and you're trustworthy and you're trusted. So we will always look kind of other housey, because we're going to be this kind of bit flamboyant out there appearance, but they'll all be slightly different.
I'm glad to hear it. I was going to ask that question because, again, as beautiful as it is, I take myself back to when I was travelling a lot to New York, and New York, of course, Manhattan, and I would deliberately go village to village, because in your downtime I'd walk everywhere, and you want to soak up the place. And so I think, as if I were a New Yorker coming to London, I think I'd adopt the same mentality, which is South Kent's great, right? And you can wander into all kinds of wonderful places. But so's Covent Garden, so's Belgravia, and I enjoyed the surprise of how's the building different. I want the same standard of service, but I want a different feel.
You want to feel that the offer is the same in terms of the service delivery and what you can expect. But you're absolutely right, and the whole thing is that central London, as with New York, is made up of a series of villages, and those villages are all fundamentally different, and there's not a right or wrong. It's just different people for different reasons want to be in different places. So we know that Covent Garden is very much entertainment, very theatrical, maybe a bit more bohemian, whereas South Kensington is very cultured and grown up and residential and lovely garden squares. So you kind of morph into those environments and reflect those environments.
And I presume as a customer, I could, if I were staying for 3 months, I could do a month in each and...
You would, yes. I mean, if you wanted to do a month in each, you would be absolutely able to do that. You can book for any length at any time. But also, once we've opened the other 2 assets, and indeed we will look to open more, if you are staying at South Kensington, you could use the club in Covent Garden, or you could use the club in Belgravia, and then it becomes an even more useful offering. And why the frustration for me is that the buildings take so long to develop and build that it's painfully slow to get to the next launch when I really want to create this brand, because when we have more of them, the brand ethos will continue to build. Yes,
yeah, I'm sure it will. So let's look to the future with the other house. What is the vision? Where does it go? Does it stop?
No, it doesn't stop. It'll never stop. As I say, excuse me. We have 3 assets. We have South Kensington, Covent Garden, and we're just going for planning permission in Belgravia. We will look for more in central London. I have to say, for me, W1 is my patch. My offices have always been in W1, and we haven't got anything in W1 yet, and that could be...
Where would you be, north or south of Oxford Street?
Well, that's a really interesting question. Probably both, because if you take Marylebone and Fitzrovia, they are so completely different from Mayfair. Yeah. They may be W1, and I personally... being a kind of W1 babe, see W1 as the centre of central London, but Marylebone and Mayfair are 2 different places, and then we could go around maybe to Notting Hill or to Kensington, so that we do the whole circle around Hyde Park, so we're in the bullseye. And
talk me through, from your guests, customers so far, what's the mix between tourists to more business travellers to local buyers?
Yeah. So we have a really good mix, and of course it slightly alters time of year. So obviously during the summer period, except for our people who are staying for weeks or months, it's more of a tourist market, people coming for the holidays in central London. And because our offering enables us to combine a number of club flats together, we can get big families, multi-generational families coming to stay. So the summer is very much more transient. But then we're just about, with September coming up, that we're going to get a huge influx of people who want to stay for a long time. So that will be the kind of high net worth international student, the parents who do not want their children to go into halls of residence. They've paid for a top drawer education, and they want them to have the concierge and be safe and have the facilities, and everything is packaged up so they don't have to worry about getting their internet or their phone line, insurance, or whatever bills. It may be, all bills, it's all done for them. But also the beauty for them is that they only need to stay for as long as they want. So they're not, they don't have to take some long-term contract.
So for some holidays they check out, but rebook for the next term.
Yeah.
Next
year. And they can come back to the same flat. They can store all their kit. We'll bring it out. Suits them perfectly. It suits us perfectly, as it happens. But that means they have total flexibility. They can come for the term time and leave for the holidays. Corporates who are going back for the holidays, they can check out if they want to. They may or may not want to, because they may want to keep all their belongings in their flat. We also, you interestingly talked about the domestic market. One of the things that we found, which is probably something that we hadn't anticipated would be so prevalent is, of course, a lot of people during COVID moved out to the country. They have found that they've moved out too far to make commuting easy, so they need a pied-à-terre. So we have now launched a wonderful, which I think is the first one, package called Stay As You Choose, where you can buy a number of nights, which you can use across the year, book when you want to. Because obviously the longer you stay, the more competitive the rates come. So for many people, they buy a package of nights and they book maybe a day or two in advance, and they then can come in and use a club flat. If they want to leave their wheelie and they want their stuff laundered, we can do all that, and then we can bring it back in again. So there are so many different ways that people need to live flexibly. And I think that's, although we started working on this 10 years ago or more, that whole kind of flexible living and the whole concept of providing experiences and service on tap has just become more and more relevant.
I couldn't agree with you more, and the launch has gone incredibly well from what I've seen. Talk to us about the next buildings. We've hinted at them, but Covent Garden.
Yes, so the next so we soft opened South Kensington in July. We're now fully opened, and it's been a phenomenal exercise because you've got a new concept, a new brand, a new operation. The rule book wasn't written, so we're writing it as we go along. We had the vision, but actually getting everything kind of cut and dry is a monumental effort. So it's been a fantastic journey for all the team as well to come on. Covent Garden is currently being developed, so if anyone listening to this goes to Covent Garden, it's next to the Lion King and the London Transport Museum, and about 2 minutes from the Piazza, all wrapped up in
less
kind
than
of,
that, I would say.
Yes, probably.
It's right there, isn't it?
Yep, it's right in the middle, and it is the most beautiful site you could imagine because it's made up of 7 different buildings bound by 4 little streets. So when you walk around it, it looks like 7 buildings, but we've combined it into one. There's a light well in the middle, so there's a fantastic atrium down the centre, and all the old buildings around that atrium, and we've been able to keep some of the exteriors of the original buildings. So it is really exceptional, and of course it's just the most stunning location. When I first saw it, I saw that building, I thought, no, we can never get that. Just not going to be possible. But we did. So that was really exciting. And then our next acquisition is in Belgravia, right opposite or looking onto Ebury Square. It's a building which is not the most beautiful at the moment, and which we're going to be able to transform into something, I hope, fabulous, providing we get our consent. So I can't be kind of cut and dry, but I think what we're going to do is going to be great for the area, and I think that actually most communities understand what a great addition the other house is to an area, because not only does it have people that go out and support the local economy, but you bring people in as well. So that is going to be really, really exciting. We're very much into sustainability. That is one of our other core pillars. So obviously with Covent Garden and South Kensington, we're taking existing properties and retaining them and then enhancing them. And with Belgravia, although we will take the kind of external fabric off, we keep the foundations, we keep all the inner structure so that we can be as absolutely sustainable as possible when we build up again. And how we build and how we operate is really important. Matters to our consumer and matters to us. Yeah. And of course we are in the beautiful situation that we are owner, developer and operator. So we can take a long-term view. We're not just doing something for a short-term gain or short-term benefit. We can make sure that we manage the whole cycle of sustainability in the right kind of way.
You are really quite phenomenal and impressive and rare, if I may say kind of those things. So no, I'm conscious and busy, which means that you're going to rush off to your next meeting soon. I want to ask you a question around leadership, and if you could boil it down, to take on. I mean, building LCP is one thing, incredible, and continues to roll on as a very successful business. Taking on the other house is something that's just too big for my little brain to kind of wrap around. In a nutshell, your leadership style and your ability to take the idea to a reality, 3 or 5 words, what did it take?
It takes drive, it takes determination, it takes a lack of self-doubt in terms of being able to deliver it, and in terms of believing in the concept. It also takes inspiring other people and bringing other people on your journey with you. And it requires being very hardworking, very dedicated, and very hands-on. These things don't magic themselves. You've actually got to do the doing. Certainly at startup stage, although we have 3 very large assets, we are a startup. You have to do the doing. You have to have the attention to detail, particularly with a brand. Everything's got to be right. But it is drive, determination, inspiration, and also what I always say is not accepting a roadblock and finding a way around that roadblock, and often finding that that journey round that roadblock can end up with a better outcome than what you had originally intended.
I think that's perfect. We can keep talking and talking. I'm not running out of questions, but I'm conscious of your time, and also keeping things nice and neat for our listeners on their commute or whatever it may be. So I'm going to dive into our quickfire questions.
Perfect. I wait.
Is that all right? Now I have to read these because somebody sitting off camera always produces them, and I never remember them. So here we go. Modern architecture or historical buildings?
That's a really tough one, but I think I'm going to go in this instance with historical buildings because so much of what we're doing is embedded in history, well, both with LCP and the other house, and I am surrounded where I live with the most beautiful Nash villas, so I'm going to go with historical.
Good. Winter wonderland or tropical paradise? They're completely random.
Yeah, I love them both, but if I have to choose, I'm going to choose for tropical paradise.
Okay, let's just drill into that a little bit more. Well, you're thinking of somewhere. Where are you thinking?
Oh, I've been to many different tropical paradises, whether it be Oman or Sri Lanka. I could go on endlessly. But I do like a place which I can combine tropical paradise with interesting things to do. And the other thing is I love train journeys. I love actually being on the move, and the best way to see a country, as far as I'm concerned, is going in some ramshackle train across the countryside.
Brilliant. Fine dining or street food?
These are all very difficult questions, Andrew, but I'm going to opt for, in this particular case, I'm going to opt for street food.
Are you?
Mm-hmm.
Of what nationality?
Well, there can be all sorts of different nationalities. And if we're talking about places on offer in central London, I have my favourite Japanese cafe, I have my Indian street cafe, I have my Chinese shack in, I think, Great Titchfield Street. I think it's Noodle and Snack, it's called. I would go... fine dining
Today,
is great.
What are you feeling? What?
Today would be Japanese.
There you go. Great. Can I come with you?
You may indeed, afterwards.
Moving on, I always ask this question. Bowie or the Beatles?
I think Bowie.
Good.
I'm
not supposed to be biased, but when people give the right answer, I
have
declare
to.
that's the right,
Well, all my
right
other answers wrong then.
No. Well, I'm feeling Chinese today, Naomi, but Japanese it is. Okay, final question, and I always ask this question of everyone as well, which is, if you could own any property or building in the world, anywhere in the world, what would it be, and what would you do with it?
Well, of course, that's a very huge question for quick-fire questions, so I'm going to actually give you a fairly easy answer. I think, given that we have the other house, South Kensington, and it's the area of culture and architecture, I'm going to choose the Royal Albert Hall. Beautiful architecture, beautiful icon, very much pivotal to South Kensington. And what would I do with it? I think I'd turn it into a concert hall.
I mean, what could be better than that? I feel like sharing something which is highly embarrassing, having lived here for 20 odd years. I've never been on the inside of that building. I'm ashamed to admit it.
Well,
but
get in touch.
You must have a box.
The other house is going to be having a very strong relationship with the Albert Hall.
So sign up.
So You let me know, and we'll be able to organise something.
Brilliant. And I'll bring some cheeky sashimi that we can tuck
Yeah,
into
yes,
on the
we
side.
combine all of the wish list together.
Naomi, you are a megastar. Really, really inspiring. And I have no doubt that you are just going to continue to be a force of nature, an incredible entrepreneur, and somebody that London and the real estate market really needs. So thank you for joining us. Thank you ever so much.
Well, Andrew, thank you. And those were incredibly generous words. I don't know that they're true, but very nice to hear. Thank you.